Dan Quinn will return for the 2023 season, but will Kellen Moore? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your
Locked
daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on
Cowboys.
Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for tuning in. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. I am Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. He is Landon McCool. Check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, Dan Quinn announced that he will return for the 2023 season. How big of a win is this for the Cowboys?
It's enormous. It's one of those things that we I think all kind of hoped in the back, beyond hope, in the back of our minds, and thought maybe there's a chance. Honestly, I think that there is some logical sense to this. We'll get into all of that, but it's huge. It's enormous. It's another year with Dan Quinn and Parsons together, which to me equals, magic. I think, just on a continuity level for your defense, it's enormous. I just think it provides a very kind and soft floor for the 2023 season that I hope that the Cowboys can kind of build on.
Yeah, I agree on all fronts. We're going to talk about this from every angle. But let's start with Dan Quinn himself.
Yeah.
It sounds like he was maybe the favorite to get the job in Indianapolis. He was certainly one of the top two in Denver. He was in the top two in Arizona. Why do you think he decided to remove his name from consideration?
I tweeted this too, and I still can't remember exactly where we had this conversation, but I remember having this conversation with you that I said something to the long of, everyone talks about how the reason you take these jobs when you're a defensive coordinator and offensive coordinator is because it's so rare. There's only 32 of these teams. The head coaching opportunities don't come along that often. You don't get an opportunity to be a head coach of an NFL team very often. That's the pitch that's constantly made for the situation. Well, in Dan Quinn's situation, he's already been a head coach once, and to get a second opportunity is not going to happen very often, and to get a third one is even more rare. And so my point has been, like, there is an element of this, which I think is playing out now, where Dan Quinn should and can be a little bit choosy. And I don't know that any of these kind of three jobs that are available or open right now appealed to him so much that he felt like he wanted to hitch his horse to it. Dan Quinn's still a relatively young coach.
Yeah.
And so, like, whatever head coaching job he's going to take, I'm assuming he's going to want to take for the long haul in order to kind of set himself up for that.
I think he'd take a 5-year deal is what he wants, is a 5-year deal wherever he goes.
And so I think in order to kind of set himself up in the long haul, I think he's got to get into a situation that he feels is right. Look, there's not a lot of great coaching situations that are available. Like, when your head coach has been fired, your situation is generally not that good. But look, I think he understands this situation in the Cowboys better than he understands those other situations. And I think if given his druthers, these other three teams may not have been situations that he wanted to get into, because he knows that if it flames out here, if it doesn't work out there for whatever reason, he's not going to get his chance to kind of do this again for a third time. And I think, again, we don't know what happens with McCarthy next year. So there is a chance that there's
I believe it's McCarthy's last year of his deal, I believe, right?
I think that's right. And so I think, there is an opportunity that Jerry could have said, hey, look, these aren't necessarily the greatest coaching jobs, and who knows which coaching job may be available next year. As much as Jerry talked about how he wants Mike to be the coach here as long as Tom Landry, Jerry fired Tom Landry. So who knows?
I would also mention, like, I wonder if the Seattle job eventually opens up, and that's something that he would be interested in as well. Because I think Pete Carroll is the oldest coach in the league right now. He's in his 70s, I believe now.
Definitely. He's definitely the oldest coach.
And maybe that's someplace he's also looking at, like, hey, if that job opens up in 2 years, that would be an ideal landing spot. But really quickly, back to the spots that he could have taken. This isn't like Doug Peterson, who was a retread head coach, going to Jacksonville, where you have the number one pick coming up, and you have Trevor Lawrence, and you've got all this cap space. You look at the three situations, right? It's the Colts, who have cap space, but don't own the number one pick and don't have a quarterback. It's the Cardinals, who don't have cap space and just paid a quarterback a ton of money who's injured. And then it's the Broncos, who don't have draft picks and have a quarterback that's paid a bunch of money and it's not very good. So, like,
Well,
none of those options are great.
and also those, I mean, look, I wouldn't speak as much about the Colts situation, but with the Colts, you've got an owner who is kind of a little bit out there, which is fine. We've got an owner who's a little bit out there, but you know, you look at the Cardinals situation organizationally right now, that's a mess. Like, I don't know why anyone,
right?
Yeah, I don't know that anyone like an established coach that has options would choose to go to Arizona right now. You know, even with Kyler Murray, just because it's a mess over there.
Yes.
And then I think with Denver, like, look, the news, the rumors that you are hearing about the Waltons ownership early on have not been great so far. And I could totally see how, you know, we were hearing rumors that, and who knows if any of this is true, but like the Waltons were skipping interviews in order to go hunting, you know, and stuff like that. I can see how some of that could really kind of scare you off a little bit for a job that you aren't necessarily dying to hop into in the first place, right? So I think there is something to the idea that Quinn is, you know, keeping his powder dry for a job that maybe better suits him down the road.
Yeah, and before we talk about what this means for the Cowboys going forward, we should also mention, like, Dan Quinn, it seems like he's being paid pretty well by the Cowboys as a defensive coordinator. These numbers are never released, but I got a feeling he's being paid more than a few head coaches in the league right now. So the fact that you can hang out, be a defensive coordinator, be on a really good team, a high-profile team, and be getting paid like a head coach certainly isn't a bad option as you kind of wait to see what other jobs might open up a year, 2 years from now.
Head coaching jobs are the prestigious jobs in the NFL, but I have to think that Dan Quinn's probably having as much fun as he will have in the NFL right now. He's coordinating a defense. He doesn't have the pressure that Mike McCarthy has on him, and he's playing with a Hall of Fame level, I would assume. I think we safe to say that Parsons on that trajectory level, you know, defensive young player that he's getting to mold. And, you know, there's lots of things about, you know, the day to day that he probably really enjoys in Dallas that, you know, he'll get paid more to be a head coach, but there'll also be a lot more pressure. He won't be able to deal with the defense nearly as much as he liked, you know, so I think there's things about this that are appealing.
Well, you also have to build your own staff, and that takes a lot of work. It's
a different job.
Again. Yeah, he will be a head coach again. I just think smartly he's being really picky because if you get fired twice as a head coach, unless you are Bill Parcells level of a coach or Bill Belichick, it's really hard to get that third coaching job. I even think like somebody like Mike McCarthy, who has won a Super Bowl, had success in Dallas. If things don't work out like this upcoming year, he might even have a hard time getting a job the third time around. So I think Quinn he's doing the right thing by kind of slow playing it, but also the right thing because we want him to stay.
Obviously.
So it's awesome to mention that. All right, Landon, let's talk about the impact this has for the Cowboys kind of moving forward. Well, before we do that, we want to let you know that this show is brought to you by LinkedIn. As a small business owner or hiring manager, you know that success in 2023 all depends on the team members that you surround yourself with. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. With LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people who have the skills, value, and experience to help you achieve your goals. LinkedIn Jobs helps you quickly attract qualified candidates to your open jobs with their targeting tools. They go beyond just resume data by using insights from your job post, your company, and their 875 million member profiles to put your post in front of the most qualified candidates. Identify the most qualified candidates on LinkedIn Jobs and connect with them fast and for free. LinkedIn Jobs makes it easy to screen and rate applicants based on your job qualifications all in one platform. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Subscribe to the Locked On NFL podcast and get daily conversations on the biggest NFL stories, plus in-depth analysis on the biggest games with NFL key predictions every Friday. And then on Monday, local insiders cover the weekend with game-to-game episodes. Locked On NFL, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Landon, I've got to say, on Tuesday, Wednesday, I wasn't feeling all that optimistic about the Cowboys kind of going into the offseason, because it's like, how do you improve when you've got all these free agents and you're going to be losing Dan Quinn, and you've got these two teams ahead of you, the 49ers and the Eagles, that are so good. But I will say, bringing back Dan Quinn does give me it gave me a big sigh of relief, because it makes me know that the Cowboys aren't necessarily going to have the #1 defense in the league, but they're going to be so well coached. And that coaching staff is going to be able to elevate the talent on defense. So I feel really good about the defense going forward. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's a daunting task to kind of reload the offense and the defense, especially with two brand new coordinators. Where I was concerned was that, like, how do I describe this? I was afraid that it felt like kind of a mismatch in where this team was. Like, it almost felt like, with McCarthy and with Dak, it felt like a half kind of run back situation, except, you were going to, at that point, you're thinking that you're losing both your coordinators, you're going to lose some personnel. I think the fact that you're able to kind of potentially, stabilize and rerun back the defense with your defensive coordinator, it allows you to kind of feel like, okay, I have confidence that the defense is going to be good, and that I don't have to worry about that. I mean, we still got to deal with free agents and draft and all that stuff, but I don't have concerns about players learning a new system, or, whether or not these guys fit into what Dan Quinn wants to do. We know all of that. So it's just that much more of a known situation that makes you comfortable about where you're headed as a defense, at least going into next season.
On top of that, I think it makes free agency a whole heck of a lot easier, right? Because number one, I was afraid, like, personally, if, let's say, Dan Quinn got the Denver job, that he would start poaching some of the mid-level free agents from this team. Like, scared to death that Leighton Vander Esch would sign with the Broncos on a cheap deal. Like, that's pretty close to where his family lives and where they grew up. Maybe he would sign over there. But now that Quinn returns, it just feels to me like they're going to be able to get back Leighton Vander Esch, and they might even be able to get back Donovan Wilson. And you'll see guys, maybe Dante Fowler, or guys like Dante Fowler, be like, I want to play for Dan Quinn one more year. Or, hey, I'm a former first-round pick. I want to see if Dan Quinn can help turn my career around. I just think he makes the offseason so much easier for you on that side of the ball.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, no offense to whoever would have been the next defensive coordinator, my thought process was that, maybe you elevate someone like Joe Witt Jr., who definitely is deserving of an opportunity to become a defensive coordinator. I could have gotten excited or behind that, but it still would have been a different vibe. It still would have been a lot of unknown. It still would have been a lot of, okay, where's the differences between Quinn and Witt? And
I wouldn't be surprised, though, this year if they do a lot of grooming to get Witt ready for that job.
Absolutely. I definitely agree. And I think Witt makes the most sense simply because he has separate experience with McCarthy and Quinn, right? Yeah. So it's not like he's only a Quinn guy. But beyond that, I think the vibe is different with Quinn coming back, because not only obviously the continuity aspect, but what, like you mentioned, he's a draw. Like he's a draw for people that if you want to go out there and sign a cheap 1 year free agent.
I think Fowler's a great example. Like, I don't think Dante Fowler had an amazing year this year. I think he was a good pass rusher. He came on a vet minimum deal.
It was solid, valuable to have, like, just a solid player as a rotational pass rusher
on a vet minimum deal, because he played with Dan Quinn before, right? Like, you're going to see that again, this offseason, I can guarantee it, they will bring in a couple guys like Dante Fowler because they just want to play with Dan Quinn.
Yeah, and I think that has a whole bunch of value. Obviously, Joe Witt Jr. It may not have that same kind of draw just because he doesn't have that name value yet. So it's nice to have that extra added aspect of having Dan Quinn back.
Yeah, the great thing is they don't have to learn a new scheme this offseason. This will be the third year of them using the same scheme. So you would think, some of the guys that have been there this whole time, you just have to do less of the install and all that kind of stuff. You can build off previous experiences. And by the way that this defense played in the playoffs this year was unbelievable. And I know that's hard to replicate that, but if they can play anywhere close to that style again next year, this is a team that, I would be shocked if they don't win double-digit games just because of their defense alone.
Yeah, again, like it would be, I would say, unprecedented. Definitely unprecedented if they led the league in turnovers again, but that doesn't mean
that's not going to happen. It's just not.
That's not that won't. We said it wouldn't happen last year too, by the way. But yeah, like that's obviously not likely to happen. But that doesn't mean that you can't still have an incredible defense. Obviously, we saw the shape of how the defense changed from 2021 to 2022. I imagine it could be very similar as well. So,
we saw them in 2021 lead the NFL in turnovers, but give up a lot of big plays. This year, they led the league in turnovers. Didn't have quite as many, but just were better on defense, right? Like they could actually shut you down for whole halves at a time. You're not going to probably lose a lot. You're going to be getting some key guys back. I wouldn't be surprised if the defense took another step forward next year. And I don't even know how that's possible, but I could see it.
Well, Micah Parsons gets a step better, which I think is possible, and that's
or that you have. Let's not forget they have a bunch of young guys on this team that are either starting, backups, or reserve guys. Like Damone Clark, example, he was somebody that played a lot this season that we didn't anticipate, but once they got healthy in the playoffs, he hardly played at all, right? And he's a rookie linebacker, and that goes the same for Israel McCollum, Sam Williams, and Jabril Cox, and they have a lot of those guys to be kind of excited about going forward.
And even these kind of middle tier guys that are like either rotational guys or key starters, they're young too. Dorrance Armstrong's only 26 years old, despite having played with us for a decade. It feels like Osa Odighizuwa is still very young. Like, this is a very young squad that definitely can continue to get better just by being a year older and being another year into the Quinn system.
So we know Dan Quinn will be back. Will Kellen Moore? More on that when we come back.
More on that.
Yeah, how about that? Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is the #1 sports book in America, and we're so excited that they're our new sports betting partner. If you're new to FanDuel, that's actually even better because new customers right now, if you join today, you can get started with $150 in free bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just sign up at FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel has all of your favorite bets from money line to point spreads to player props. Plus, you could even combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. I think I kind of like the Eagles Chiefs money line parlay this weekend. I think it pays out like plus 240. Yeah. It's all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So football fans, don't miss out. Place your first $5 bet to get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Landon. So we got some news yesterday. Kellen Moore was one of the 2 finalists for the Carolina job. They decided to go with Frank Wright instead of Kellen Moore. Can't blame him. So thought that meant that Kellen Moore is safe. Maybe not. Mike McCarthy had a press conference on Thursday. They asked him twice about Kellen Moore, whether he would return. And he said, Kellen Moore, like all the other coaches, will be evaluated. My question to you, do you think Kellen Moore returns for 2023?
I do. I think he does. I think Mike's... do I want to say this? I think Mike may be a little bit mad about the Rob and Joe Philbin stuff. And so he's, playing coy with Jerry's Kellen,
Sure.
And I don't know. I have a hard time believing that they replaced Kellen Moore with Brian Schottenheimer. Maybe because I don't want to believe it. That's the name that we keep hearing because obviously the history there. And
that sounds awful.
That really does sound awful.
If you want to, as excited as I am about Dan Quinn, if you want to deflate all my excitement, firing Kellen Moore, who's a flawed offensive coordinator, he's not perfect, to hire Brian Schottenheimer, just doesn't do it for me.
Yeah, me neither. I have a hard time believing it. Look, I mean, I think that Kellen Moore improved this year, and I think he can continue to improve. He's still a very young play caller, still a very young coach. I think that there are aspects that they should continue to work on. I think they can help him with personnel as well. I've made my thoughts clear about Kellen. I think, is he perfect? No, but I mean, no offensive coordinator is perfect. And despite that,
what offensive coordinator is perfect? Because even if you take the offense, the head coaches that are play callers, there's 4 of them this weekend. 2 of them are going to lose this week, and I can guarantee you their fans are going to be like, you know what, Andy Reid just gets too conservative in big games. Hey, Nick Sirianni, you play a good defense, and you're not able to do it. It's going to happen. You know it.
I mean, I'm old enough to remember Andy Reid play calling issues at Philadelphia. So I mean, it's every offensive coordinator is an idiot to the general public at some point, right? And that's on Twitter, I asked the question. I was like, guys, you don't want Kellen Moore? Give me some names. And frankly, the vast majority of the names that I got back outside of your tricky one was Zach Robinson. Stop giving me good answers.
PFF shell.
Yeah. I think that, outside of that, people were giving me Cliff Kingsbury and it's names they know. And I'm like, guys, you're replacing someone that you are accusing of kind of flittering off at the end of the season with the poster boy for flittering off at the end of the season. It's like, I tend to think that there is value. There's probably more value in continuity and letting Dak continue to stay in the system, not having to learn new language, not having to learn new everything, and then making adjustments with the personnel around him, tinkering further with the play calling, maybe taking some of the all curl stuff out of the offense a little bit. And maybe that's more what Mike is talking about, right? It is as a means of, because if you look, instead of just taking that quote that he had in out of context of the rest of the conversation he's had, maybe this is a shot across the bow to say, hey, we got to get rid of the kind of the rest of the Jason Garrett offense stuff, the Linehan stuff that you were comfortable with. Because honestly, as much as everyone wants to blame Kellen Moore on, calling all curls on 3rd and 10 and a key play, I would be willing to bet that the reason that he would call that play is because Dak is comfortable running that play. Because that's
it's what they've used to beat zone coverage a million times before, right?
So if you want to move off of it, that's fine, but let's not pretend like every play call is, a Kellen Moore original piece of art. No, these are things that Dak is comfortable with, that I'm sure Dak has made, requests from Kellen. They both came out of the same offensive system when they were younger. So there's going to be some crossover there. I just think that it's too easy to try to blame one person for this, and then try to, reshuffle the deck and then end up with a worse situation than what you had, considering the fact that this offense was the number 1 offense in football last 2 seasons ago, and it was top 5 this last season. And that was without Dak Prescott for 5 games. So
like I said, since 2019, when Kellen Moore and Dak have been together, they've the highest scoring offense in the league. So I'm not saying Kellen Moore is perfect, because he's not. He has flaws, just like every offensive coordinator does in the league. Now, if the Cowboys were to move on, I think one of the reasons you could talk yourself into it is if you get a grizzled veteran quarterback coach type that can really help Dak with his footwork. Because what I see is when Dak gets nervous and he feels pressure, even against San Fran, is his footwork kind of goes to crap, right? And he probably needs somebody that'll get on him about that stuff. But there's just not that many of those guys out there. Tom Moore is 84 years old now. He's not coming back to be your offensive coordinator. Todd Monken is, from Georgia, who's the offensive coordinator there, maybe. But you're talking about one potential name. with so many teams needing offensive coordinators right now, it's why you're seeing Nathaniel Hackett be considered a great offensive coordinator candidate. Mike LaFleur, who just got fired from the Jets, got hired right back to the Rams to be a head coach or offensive coordinator. Like, they're just look around the league. There's not a lot of good options out there for OCs.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, as far as like shopping wise, it probably would have been better. Just shopping wise, I don't mean like actual wise. It might have been better if Moore had stayed and Quinn had left. If that's maybe they both stay, so we don't have to worry about
way
this.
more defensive
Because there's
coordinators.
way more defensive
Yes.
coordinators out there. There's way more people that you could get a qualified defensive coordinators. I would much rather have Quinn. I'm not saying
Yes,
that, but just my point being, on the market, the supply of offensive coordinators is not close to what the demand is, and on the defensive side of the ball, it's the opposite. So
because if you're a good offensive coordinator, you're a head coach.
you're a head
right?
coach. That's right, and that's what we're getting closer and closer to every,
what's so
every
funny?
year.
Just because of proximity, I live near Buffalo. I listen to a lot of Buffalo talk sport radio stuff, and I can remember at this time last year, Bills fans like, hey, we got to move on from Brian Dable. It just he throws too much in big games, and their offense just isn't consistent enough. And now he might be the head coach of the year for another team. So every team hates their offensive coordinator. It's again, unless you have an awesome other option out there, I think the Cowboys would be wise to just keep Kellen Moore one more year. If it doesn't work out, then you move on from the whole coaching staff after year 4.
Yeah, I think when you've got a top 3 offense and you want to make it better, you tinker. You don't completely wipe the slate clean.
You add a skill player, right?
Yeah.
You add a veteran to help maybe you don't change the whole offense. It just doesn't make sense. Yeah. All right. That is it for today's show. Thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen today. For your next listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you the local insights you love to the national spotlight with daily conversations on the biggest NFL stories. Locked On NFL, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. A little programming note. We'll be back on Monday with Chad Ryder from NFL.com.
That'll be great.
To help you get previewed for the Senior Bowl, which starts next Monday. The East-West Shrine game is actually happening. I think practices start tomorrow. A couple of good players there, including Zay Flowers, who I know is a potential Cowboys target at receiver. Check him out this weekend if you haven't done that. Go follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. We'll see you guys next time.